Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy this video, we invite those of you who haven't yet done so, to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the notification icon, to be notified when the next one is uploaded. In today's offering, we will be looking at how the media and Joe Biden colluded to place America on the edge of fascism, by presenting the electorate with a choice between a Democrat and a fascist. For Joe Biden, he thought it would be an easy win for him, despite what the Bible tells us about Jesus and Barabbas, or recent UK history tells us about David Cameron and Brexit. Well, we all know how that ended for Jesus and David Cameron, and Joe Biden has always wanted to be martyred on the cross of virtue signaling. There's no disputing the fact that Trump is a compulsive liar, apprentice fascist, convicted fraudster and sex abuser, who masterminded a coup to try and overturn the will of the people. But the media conveniently overlook the fact that it was criminally negligent of Joe Biden and Merrick Garland to have allowed this coup mastermind to be in a position to contest an election 4 years after his failed coup attempt. The media collectively failed to call for his prosecution from the outset of the Biden administration because they were busy monetizing the outrage that he was generating. It is difficult to determine who is worse, his supporters, or the detractors who are forever pulling their punches because the price of milk is high, or because the color of the sky is translucent purple. History shows that when dictators get power, they prey on supporters and detractors alike. So why anyone in America would consider voting for Trump other than his immediate family is beyond me. For crying out loud, there are gazillions of living witnesses, like Michael Cohen and co., attesting to the folly of supporting this man, yet still others persist. Astonishing, absolutely effing astonishing. So, for those members of the media who do not recognize their complicity in America's current predicament, this is for you. Today we will be starting with MSNBC and Joy Reid's clip titled, "He Cannot Be Commander-in-Chief Again, Trump Trashed Memory of Murdered Soldier," new report alleges. Our fine sister, who is openly pro-Harris and anti-Trump, is a lead presenter on one of those channels that Trump labels fake news. She clearly recognizes the danger that Trump poses to democracy, but somehow continues to help him on his way. How can that be, you say? Well, let us show you. So here she is describing him.
But we begin tonight with yet another reminder of just how low Trump can go, particularly when it comes to this country's servicemen and women. The Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg, who just 4 years ago broke the news that Donald Trump described American fallen soldiers as suckers and losers, has a brand new piece out tonight that lays out stunning new details about the extent of Trump's megalomania and disregard for American military and structure.
And then going on to recount the report of how during his first presidency, he had told his chief of staff John Kelly that he wanted his generals to be more like those of Hitler, the politician turned dictator.
First, he gets Trump's former chief of staff John Kelly to go on the record and confirm that Trump did ask him why his generals weren't more like German generals. Kelly tells Goldberg that he asked Trump to clarify, saying, quote, "Do you mean the Kaiser's generals? Surely you can't mean Hitler's generals." To which Trump said, yeah, Hitler's generals.
This pro-Trump U.S. Marine Corps general, who in January 2017 was sworn in by Vice President Mike Pence as the first Secretary of Homeland Security in the Trump administration, earned such a reputation for being an aggressive enforcer of immigration law and advocate of building the border wall, that he was promoted to Chief of Staff just 6 months later. As Secretary of Homeland Security, he oversaw some of the most controversial policies of Trump's agenda, including a travel ban targeting several majority Muslim countries, a reduction in refugee admissions and stepped-up deportations of undocumented immigrants. This hardline Trumper, as Chief of Staff, is said to have removed the likes of Anthony Scaramucci and Steve Bannon from office. By the end of December 2018, he was out of the White House and went on to become a strong critic of Donald Trump, especially after January 6. This hardline Trump general, who had earlier refuted reports that his president's call to the widow of a slain U.S. soldier had been insensitive, is the one who is now leading the condemnation of Trump for showing disdain for veterans and American service members killed in action. The point being, he is just one of many like Michael Cohen and Anthony Scaramucci, who thought they could rub along with Trump for some reason or the other, until they couldn't. But here's the icing on the cake. The revelations that are the subject of Joy's program are coming from the same journalist that had reported on similar matters back in 2020, after he had interviewed Kelly. So, did the journalist and Kelly withhold this latest gem for release some 2 weeks before an election, in which Trump is reportedly neck and neck in the polls? Unsurprisingly, Joy and her panel are reluctant to criticize both Kelly and Goldberg for withholding this information, much like they were reluctant to criticize Biden and Garland for not prosecuting Trump for masterminding a coup. Joy also criticized Goldberg's report of the disdain that Trump showed for a slain Latino soldier, under circumstances that clearly indicated his racist nature.
But the most disgusting allegation, which his team denies, is that Trump offered to pay for the funeral of specialist Vanessa Guillen, who was bludgeoned to death by a fellow soldier at Fort Hood in Texas. It took 3 months to find her remains. For months, activists, politicians, and specialist Guillen's family called for an investigation into the Army base. The Secretary of the Army, Ryan McCarthy, ordered an investigation into Fort Hood's command culture. The investigation led to the firing of dozens of people. In a press conference, McCarthy said that the murder shocked our conscience. The Atlantic reported that Trump didn't like that. He was agitated by McCarthy's comments and raised questions about the severity of the punishments dispensed to senior officers and non-commissioned officers. Publicly, he offered to pay for the funeral services of Specialist Guillen. But it's what he allegedly said privately when he found out what it cost that will disgust you. According to Goldberg, who spoke with attendees and saw contemporaneous notes of the meeting, Trump became angry and shouted, quote, "It doesn't cost $60,000 to bury an effing Mexican." He turned to his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and issued an order. Don't pay it. Later that day, he was still agitated. "Can you believe it?" he said, according to a witness. "Effing people trying to rip me off."
Yet non-white voters can find some reason or the other to rub along with Trump, just like Kelly, Cohen, and Scaramucci. Joy then goes on to talk about Goldberg's report on how Trump wanted to recall a general and an admiral back to service just so he could court-martial them, simply because they had been critical of him.
Goldberg also reports that Trump, while still president, wanted to call back to active duty Admiral William McRaven and General Stanley McChrystal, who had become critical of Trump, so that they could be court-martialed because of their opposition.
It is astonishing that Joy can describe Trump as...
Look, I know it is easy to lose track of this man's depravity, but these reports serve as daily reminders of who he really is. A selfish, vile, wannabe dictator guided by vengeance. I want to read just a little bit more of it. This is how it starts. It says the personal qualities displayed by Trump in his reaction to the cost of the Guillen funeral, which he described: contempt, rage, parsimony, racism, hardly surprised his inner circle. Trump has frequently voiced his disdain for those who serve in the military and for their devotion to duty, honor, and sacrifice. Former generals who have worked for Trump say that the sole military virtue he prizes is obedience. As his presidency drew to a close and in the years since, he has become more and more interested in the advantages of dictatorship and the absolute control over the military that he believes it would deliver. "I need the kind of generals that Hitler had," Trump said in a private conversation in the White House, according to 2 people who heard him say it.
Yet she and her channel routinely ask their viewing public to set all these aside to discuss the benefits of his policy vis-a-vis those of his challenger. One of her guests, retired Major General Eaton, acknowledged that something must be wrong with America if the election can be close between Trump and his challenger.
So here we've got this guy, this former president, this guy who got voted out of office, who is saying over and over and over again, repeated, put in the press, guys like General Kelly telling us exactly what went on in closed doors. And yet, this is a close race. This puts so much in question about what's going on in this great country. And we need to box this guy up. Cannot be commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of the United States ever again.
But the nub of the matter is the adeptness with which Joy sidestepped any responsibility by her and her channel to point the finger at Fox News.
Yeah, and the point, General Eaton, is that Fox isn't going to tell them. And a lot of these people watch that. They watch right-wing media. They'll never hear about this. They won't be told it by the podcast they listen to by their right-wing media. They'll just be locked out of this information. That he believes that the military should be used to shoot American citizens, to round up American citizens. He has no respect, not just for the military, but for the American people, because he thinks so little of them that he thinks he'll just order his generals to commit war crimes inside the United States. And so, I guess I'll ask you the same question. Are there ways in which veterans and military folks, I know that Vote Vets is doing, heroic work trying to do that, but how do we break through the wall of disinformation that is flooding our members of the United States military who may never, ever read this story?
Joy, in the mess halls, in the waiting rooms, in the company rooms, you see Fox News. And if all you watch is Fox News, you're not going to get the whole story, obviously. And when you talk to veterans, when you talk to active duty military and say, here are the serious points that I'd like to make for you, they will immediately go to fact check what you just told them and find out that what you just told them is in fact true, because their diet of Fox News has turned them into Fox News regurgitators. And it is when you talk about breaking the information cycle and getting inside the news cycle that we have to do, and Mr. Sykes is spot on. We've got 14 days. And I can't tell the Secretary of Defense to immediately shut down Fox News, but that is a serious issue. And trying to penetrate that has got to be left, right, word of mouth.
Even if we accept her views at face value, what about the fact that as President and Commander-in-Chief President Biden allowed Fox to continue to be broadcast as information to mess halls, waiting rooms, and company rooms, at the public expense? How about that? General Eaton may not be able to tell the Secretary of Defense to immediately shut down Fox News, but guess who can? Yes, that would be President Biden. How about the fact that MSNBC keeps making its platform available to Trump and his surrogates to spread and launder their disinformation at will, to help generate outrageous content that MSNBC can monetize, while representing that they are simply presenting both sides of the debate? It is on MSNBC that Michael Steele acknowledged that election is an endgame for a man who wants to be a dictator, so who cares what policies a compulsive liar and wannabe dictator is claiming?
Michael, as we've talked about, Trump's rhetoric keeps getting darker, it seems. He was asked this weekend if he thinks Election Day will be peaceful. Here's how he responded.
I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, because they can't let that happen.
Michael, your reaction to that?
I don't know what else to say to my fellow Americans. I really don't. I'm tired of trying to explain the obvious. I'm tired of trying to help you understand what the man is telling he's going to do. Yes, there will be problems on Election Day. Why? Because that's the setup play. They've been telling and telegraphing that they've got operatives already on the ground and boards of elections who prepared to disrupt this process. Folks, this is an end game for power. and for power by one man who wants to be a dictator. He's told us that. So, yeah, when he sits there and goes, yeah, you know, the problem is from within, that's projection. He knows where the problem is. He is creating the problem. And so I don't know what else to say at this point. Y'all see the stuff. You had 4 years. You saw what happened. There was January 6th. You seem to care about that. Now you're like, oh, let's go back to that. That's okay. So I don't know what else the campaign can do. I don't know what kind of messaging is left. The American people have to decide what kind of country they want. Donald Trump is telling you what he's going to give you. So don't think come January of 2025 or 2026 or 7 that all of a sudden you're going to have, you know, a chicken in your pot. Because likely your behind's going to be sitting in a concentration camp on your way to be pushed out of the country because you said something he didn't agree with.
It is on MSNBC that Victoria DeFrancesco explained how people belonging to a demographic that Trump has consistently attacked and dehumanized can see themselves as outside the grouping.
Victoria, there's so much new polling happening because it's that end of the election cycle. We have this from the New York Times, Siena College, showing Vice President Harris struggling to hold on to Latino voters right now compared to Democratic nominees who've come before her. And according to Pew Research, Latinos are projected to account for nearly 15% of all eligible voters this November. That's a new high. Why is she losing ground with Latino voters?
There are a whole bunch of reasons here, Anna. I'm going to give you two, but before I do that, I do want to underscore something that Michael said, which is the anxiety piece, and I want to put a political psychology spin on it. That essentially, we know from psychology, from hundreds and hundreds of studies, that anxiety, when you cue anxiety, that makes you perk up, it makes you hone in your attention more, and also in many instances, leads you to act. So there is a reason why negativity, while negative ads work. And Latinos are not immune to this. They are also cued by anxiety like everybody else. But the two things that I'm seeing, Anna, number one is that Latinos don't think that Trump is talking about them. And in this poll that you cite, the NBC poll, there's some really interesting questions there that ask, when Donald Trump is talking about immigration, is he talking about Latinos like you? And the majority of them say, no, he's talking about other immigrants. There is a difference between those Latinos who have been born here or born abroad. But even then, you're still seeing big chunks of Latinos saying, that's just rhetoric. It doesn't apply to me.
Yet when he routinely denigrates the fake news media, Joy and her channel have no issues with setting that aside to allow him and his surrogates access to their platform on the pretext of debating policies. It is on MSNBC that their most vociferous Trump critic Michael Steele acknowledged that things begin to get testy inside a campaign with about 30 days of campaigning left, to the extent that one may not want someone they are having issues with to be sitting next to them on the bus.
I'm struck by 30 days. We've all been out on the campaign trail. 30 days is like, this is where it gets crunch time. This is where tempers get short. On the campaign trail. This is where
they get short real fast.
They get short very fast. This is where it's like, you know what?
It is therefore instructive that some 7 days after saying that, Michael says this.
So there's a lot here that people have to take into consideration when they're looking at the next president. For me, it's very simple. It's very simple. When the man running for president of this country says he wants to be a dictator, full stop, I'm done. I don't give a rat's behind what else he's done, because that tells me how he sees the country and how he sees the future of the country, with him as the center of it. So I have a very, very thin line, and I know, folks who are inside the administration, my buddy here's, very close to Trump world and all that stuff. Y'all do your thing. But at the end of the day, the question you have to ask yourself is, when you wake up a year from now and your neighbor is no longer there because they were summarily taken out of their homes in the middle of the night and deported, when people in the political space have disagreed with the administration and suddenly they're being audited, the Department of Justice is on their backside, et cetera, if that's the country you want, then Trump's your man, because he's telling you that's what he's going to give you.
How can he be sat next to a Trump surrogate and former Trump White House aide and MSNBC contributor, Mark Lotter, and then pat him on the shoulder like he did? Is that because the fight against fascism does not rise to the level of any differences of opinion one may have inside a campaign? Or does Michael not realize that he is in effect desensitizing the public to the very dangers that he is warning them about, when he pats the dictator's surrogate on the shoulder like that? What about Stephanie Ruhle acknowledging the folly of the let's discuss the policies being proposed by the unrepentant liar, whose endgame is to be a dictator, and then her channel continues to do exactly that?
It's not too much to ask Kamala, say, are you for a Palestinian state if Hamas is going to run that state?
Okay.
Yes or no?
And let's say you don't like her answer. Are you going to vote for Donald Trump?
No, I'm not.
Kamala
I just said I'm not going to vote for her.
Harris is not running for perfect. She's running against Trump. We have two choices. And so there are some things you might not know her answer to. And in 2024, unlike 2016 for a lot of the American people, we know exactly what Trump will do, who he is, and the kind of threat he is to democracy.
I don't know.
So it's unclear to me how there could be an informed...
The problem that a lot of people have with Kamala is we don't know her answer to anything, okay?
But you know
and
his answer to everything.
And that's why I would never vote for him, and people shouldn't vote for him. But people also are expected to have some idea of what the program is of the person you're supposed to vote for. You're just not supposed to say, well, you have to vote for Y because X is this, that, and the other. Let's find out a little bit more. And I don't think it's a lot to ask her to sit down for a real interview as opposed to a puff piece in which she describes, like, her feelings of growing up in Oakland with nice lawns.
Then I would just say to that, when you move to Nirvana, give me your real estate broker's number and I'll be your next door neighbor. We don't live there.
Aside from the fact that we don't believe the polls to be true, because they can, and are being skewed to suit whatever narrative the buyer wants, nevertheless, any suggestion that the race is close is an indictment of the failure of the media to properly inform the public, or desensitize them to the danger.